So welcome to this pre-recorded provider bite-sized session, extending children's food experiences, developing and delivering engaging food offers and achieving nutritional learning. My name's Denise Burke and I'm one of the Childcare Works HAF Holiday Activity and Food Advisors that supports the local authorities. And this is one of a series of bite-sized sessions for HAF providers. We know that food has been one of the most challenging elements of delivering HAF. As providers, many of you are knowledgeable and skilled at delivering quality, engaging activities for children and young people. But for some, providing a substantial, ideally hot meal alongside an activity has probably been a first for some of you. And even being able to engage with various food products to be able to share the nutritional value with children has also been a bit of a challenge. How food has been provided has been different across the local authorities. So we know that some local authorities have taken the lead on food and have linked food providers with yourselves. Some have commissioned caterers, such as the school's catering service. Other local authorities have very much left it to providers to source healthy meals. And as we know, food that appeals to a younger child may not appeal to teens, who may be much happier with such things as street food. But we also need to consider, how do we build the connection with children and young people to the nutritional value and explore new foods? So that's why I'm pleased today to be joined by the panel of experts from Food for Life. And I'll hand you over to Bryn Hamer shortly, Head of Business Development at Food for Life. And he will share with us the aims and purposes of this session. And he'll be joined by his colleagues, Jane Sixsmith, Karen Langdon and Gay Dark. So over to you, Bryn, and we look forward to hearing what the panel have to say.
Hi all, hope all is good with you, and realise it's a very busy time coming up to Christmas. So I'm just going to go into the aims and purposes, just making sure that we I can actually move slides. There we go. So the introductions. Thank you very much for those. We at Food for Life are really about making sure that we can give children and their families healthy and sustainable diets. That's our main role in life. That's why we get out of bed. HAF is a fantastic programme where we can help you as the providers at the sharp end of delivery. So one thing, in terms of discussing what this purpose is, the overall we'd say is to ensure that HAF not only delivers good food within the limitations of your settings, but also makes the connection with children to nutrition, where their food comes from, and therefore increases their engagement with healthy and sustainable diets, which is obviously part of our aim. But in terms of the specifics for the aims for today, is you want to help give an outline training advice on seasonal activities that connect their children to their food. Help children engage with food preparation, something that they won't be necessarily. Relay the main nutritional messages, and hopefully then the children take those back to the families. Give practical advice. And that's the thing, we want this to be practical. We know that you're not in traditional school settings potentially, so that will mean that we have to approach things in a pragmatic fashion. And we want to kind of point to some available resources that can help you along that journey. And as we said, there's an expert panel, people who have been with Food for Life for many years, and that will help us in terms of that kind of advice and that level, as Denise has set out. So what I'm going to do now is ask a few questions of my colleague, Jane Smicksmith, who heads up our training within Food for Life and has done for a number of years. So what Jane doesn't know about these things isn't worth writing about. Just going to ask the first question of Jane, which is, so what seasonal activities might we offer with Christmas coming to extend the children's food experiences? So Jane, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I've put together a few slides here that are just sort of a launching pad, really, of ideas. I'm not saying, you know, they're all going to be suitable for your setting, but there might be something in there that just inspires you, or is just a little idea that you can use with yours. The idea of these activities then is that they're all around handling and talking about food. But perhaps in a more fun way, and then that launch pad for conversations around things. So here you can see this picture of those traditional Christmas oranges studded with cloves, which can be done really simply. You could do them with the younger children with satsumas, so that the skin isn't as tough and easy to pierce with a clove. You know, with the older children, you could get them to carve, like we can see some of these here. But it gives you the opportunity then to talk about oranges being seasonal, you know, where they're grown, nutritionally, you know, really good source of vitamin C. You could talk about the different elements of an orange, the peel, the pith, the flesh, the membrane, the juice. How you might use them in cooking. You know, you could do some squeezing of oranges to make a drink or a dressing. So lots of opportunities just with a simple activity. And the whole idea then is you've put that on the table, as it were, as a discussion point, and got children interested in food. Next slide, please. So some more ideas, again, along the same line. I in my Christmas training sessions, we often start by making some popcorn garlands, and they're just really nice to do. So one, you could look at the changing states there. So actually show them corn popping in a big pan on all you need is an induction hob, or you might have one of those funky popcorn makers that somebody could lend you. So yeah, looking at how corn changes its state, again, then talking about where does corn grow and is it the same as sweet corn? And if then, you know, you could combine it with having a little walk round somewhere and see if you can find a bay tree or some other sort of herb that you could thread on as well. And I've done it, I tried to do it once a bit too early in December with cranberries and put those on because it looks fantastic. They weren't in the shops though, because they hadn't been released from the flooded fields of North America, I don't think. So I used rose hips. I had to be careful that we didn't get the itchy powder, but that worked really nicely. And then another thing there, just making wrapping paper that then the children could take home, but using vegetables for printing. And here it's just a potato, but you could do little, I've seen it done with cabbage, the texture of the cabbage leaves, and cut like a Christmas tree shape. But again, it's an activity, and but it's with food and gives you that opportunity to talk about potatoes, parsnips, cabbage, and then perhaps move the conversation on, you know, do you eat these? How do you eat them? What's your favourite way of cooking a potato? I think I've got a couple more, Bryn. Yeah, again, if you're lucky enough to have a garden where you're doing your activity, you might be able to pick some winter herbs like sage and rosemary and thyme. You could do that at the beginning of the activity sessions, and then hang them up, tie them, hang them up, dry them, and then take those home that they could use either in the cooking at home or just hang them up in the kitchen for a nice wintry smell. We do a really nice activity where we make butter with children, starting with cream in a jam jar, shaking it until it sort of churns itself and you get the buttermilk and the butter. That's a really nice a really nice activity to do. And then you could use fresh herbs to flavour that and use that in some of the recipes that you're doing with the children. We have got a butter making activity sheet which we'll make available on the website. Next one. And just an idea here that I actually saw in a primary school, but you could do it. They created some top trumps cards for the dining table, so it was for when they wanted to generate conversations, but they were based on food. So you could set a task in the morning of, if you've got access to some laptops or something, to gather some facts about farming, and it could be based, I mean, I've put a picture here of turkeys, but it could be based around Brussels sprouts or just any food ingredient. And then don't ask me how top trumps work. I'm not really an expert on that. I'm sure you could find that out. But yeah, just create some top trumps cards that then everybody could play when they're eating their festive meals.
That's brilliant, Jane. That kind of brings to life those practical examples, really, of working and looking at the children with food. I love the top trumps idea, by the way, and yeah, that's a great one. So just moving to the next question, if we may. So I'll bring that up in a second. So next question. How can we involve children with specifically like food preparation in a safe and engaging way?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I support settings with primarily, and the questions are quite often the same. What can we do with the age of the children that we've got? Not knowing their level of skill, particularly using knives, and not having very much money to provide ingredients. So I've just put some of the ideas that I know work and that we could perhaps recommend. So it's how to engage the children in hands-on food preparation, but it sort of kills two birds with one stone in that it can be part of the meal provision. So something we often do linked to breakfast is the open-topped bagel. So it doesn't have to be bagels, it could be any bread base, but to give everybody choice of what goes on it, and also to link to sort of nutritional messaging of how to, instead of just having a bagel spread with some butter and jam, how we can get better nutrition in there. So when I do it with, I usually do it with teachers to actually show them an activity they could do in school with the youngest children. I give them a whole range of ingredients there. So I might put out, I always put cream cheese out because that's really good. Good for spreading, a good consistency, but things like hummus, or I might put out a homemade pea pate, something like that. And then a whole range of fruits and vegetables that have been sliced up in readiness, and maybe things like a little bit of cinnamon, so people, or if you're able to work with some seeds, a few seeds, but that might be something you want to avoid. But yeah, lots to talk about there, and you'll see some children doing it really carefully and arranging things and getting colours nice, and others it's like, how high can we build this volcanic topped bagel? And it doesn't matter, but it allows them to explore new tastes in a nice, safe way. And we've had some real funky combos, but actually hummus and sliced apple with a little bit of cinnamon on the top tastes really nice. Another activity, and I've seen this done as sort of like little starters to go on tables, when children are getting a bit hungry and perhaps the meal isn't there. Maybe with them, show them how you make hummus. Hummus, it seems like it's this miraculous thing that you just get in a supermarket, but it's just a tin of chickpeas, a little bit of oil, something called tahini, which is sesame paste, which you might, obviously the allergies you've got to be aware of, and season it up and put it in a blender. But then you know, let children make their own little dipping pots with it, and have that on the table just as a sort of a, sounds posh, but an appetizer, just to, and again, to get them to eat more fruit and vegetables and pulse-based things. So that's a really easy thing to do. You just need either a hand blender or a liquidizer to do that. And you can get the children involved in the actual preparation. So on the left there, we can see a stir fry. And I've done this as an activity with a big group of children where everybody has a little bit to prepare. So, you know, they might be coarsely grating carrots, they might be snapping little bits of broccoli, particularly if you've got younger children. Things like snapping of vegetables works really well. Leeks, if you cut them into little sort of chunks, you could peel them, so they don't need to use knives, so it makes it accessible and makes it safe, and you feel, you know, you've lowered the risk there. And then maybe just have I like an induction hob, a plug-in induction hob. They're only about 30 to 40 pounds. You can get them on Amazon, if I'm allowed to say that. But then all you need is a pan that can sit on an induction hob. Everybody preps, you know, their bits, and then it just goes into one nice big pot, and you can have, you know, if you've got a store cupboard with some soy sauce and maybe a bit of Chinese 5 spice, that's always quite nice. And then everybody can have a little taster. All really safe, even though everybody's handled everything and then you're sharing it, it's been cooked to a really high temperature, so that's safe. Or everybody could get involved in prepping the veg for soup. You know, that's a really good winter offering. But again, you just have to think about the age of the children that you've got with you, and what vegetables you're prepping, because something like carrots or swede or butternut squash, really hard for little ones to cut. So maybe direct them more to prepping some, I don't know, Savoy cabbage and broccoli or mushrooms, something that's easy for them to tear in their fingers. If you are using knives with them, then you would want to guide them to use the bridge and claw techniques. A bridge is when you use your hands like a bridge to hold the vegetable, and the knife goes underneath the bridge. And that, you know, is particularly useful for younger children. If you're going to slice things up, then you'd use the claw, where your fingers pin the vegetable down to the chopping board, and then the knife cuts up closely. So that's good for slicing. We do have, Food for Life do have films, we call them our skills snippets, that show the bridge and claw techniques. Another option, I suppose, a bit like the bagel option, but maybe more towards main meals, get them involved in sort of pick and mixing ingredients that can finish off their own lunch. So on the left, we've got a twice baked jacket potato recipe. So if you've got those potatoes ready baked, and then every child has half a big jacket potato cooked and cooled, they can scoop out the potato, put it in a bowl with a fork, mash it, and then pick and mix things to go in with it that they like, or you might encourage them to try something new. A little bit of cheese on the top as well, and then back in the oven, and they've sort of made their own lunch. So that's really good. Or a layered fruit, and this one's got like an oaty, like an overnight oats mix, but layer it up with fruit of their choice. And again, it gets them involved in the preparation, allows them to make choices, and hopefully gets them trying some new foods. Just one little tip is to pitch your cooking activity then to the level of the skill and experience that the children have. So we've got some salads here, which might be a nice thing for you to involve them in. But if you've got younger children, or children who you think perhaps shouldn't be given sharp knives, you know, something like a potato salad is really easy to do, where you're just picking chives. You could even use a table knife on cooked new potatoes to just bridge potato in half, bridge it again until you've got the sizes you want. Whereas something like a nice seasonal coleslaw, there we've got one with a few cranberries in it, and maybe some shredded up Brussels sprouts, they work really nice in it. Sounds odd, but raw, they work really well in coleslaw. But that would probably be something that the older children in your group would do, and you might have to do more of a small group activity there. And then just a little reminder, you know, whatever activity you do, you know, plan it ahead. Don't imagine it to just somehow miraculously run itself. You've got to get involved in the planning and think about risk assessment. So just some key points there. Remember the 4 C's of food safety: cleaning, chilling, cooking, and avoiding cross-contamination. You can find out about those if it's unfamiliar through the Food Standards Agency website. You know, set expectations with everybody that, you know, come on, we wash our hands, we'll put an apron on. If your hair's dangling down, let's just tie it back. We don't want any licking of fingers because we're going to be sharing this food. And you need to be in charge and give guidance and manage when you use sharp knives and things like graters even. You can have accidents with graters. Manage the allergies and tasting activities. Be absolutely sure about your allergies and then know what ingredients you're using. And then, you know, think about accident prevention as you go along, mopping up any spills, picking things up off the floor, using oven gloves, and keeping children away from hot surfaces and sockets. So that's just a reminder there. I'm sure you'll all be aware of that.
Thank you, Jane. You're making me very hungry here. In terms of nutrition then, what are the main messages in terms of nutrition we want to pass on to children and then hopefully to their families?
I think you just want to keep it quite simple and keep to what we know, Public Health England would want us to talk about. So, I can just see I've got a foreign, it looks like I've probably got a Spanish Eat Well guide there, the image that I've taken. Can you see the heading? But there is an English one, I can assure you. I'm being very diverse and inclusive here. So yeah, go to Public Health England, find the Eat Well guide. And the messaging, is quite clear there. It's mostly based around fruit and vegetables and then cereals, with smaller quantities of meat, fish, cheese and fats. And then you can see, there's a reminder there, we should all be drinking plenty of water, not be adding salt to our food. Do you want to just go on to the next one? I've pulled out a few points there. Then yeah, so link your messaging to the foods that you're serving, so you can explain to children, look at your plate here, look at this lovely vegetable soup and this roll on the side. It's mostly fruit and vegetables, and that's because that's a really healthy way of eating. But look, we've got some lentils in here as well, because that's going to increase the fibre and help you go to the toilet. We've not put any meat in this. We don't need to eat meat every day. And we didn't put any salt directly in this. We used a little bit of stock, which does have salt in, but we've put some spice. Can you taste that spice? And then I put a little squeeze of lemon juice in, just to sort of brighten it up a bit. You might, in schools, I often do recipes with oily fish. I make little fish cakes with canned sardines and potato. And that's really to help get that message that we should be trying to eat oily fish, in the diet, in school menus once every 3 weeks. And it's usually the least popular choice. So perhaps engaging the children with making something like little sardine fish cakes might encourage them to try it. And to have water available with meals and regularly throughout the day. And you might be able to discuss portion sizes when you're serving things, particularly if you've got that cross-section of ages. You've got some very young children in the room and then some older ones. You need to make sure that your portion sizes are appropriate. So yeah, don't worry about getting into really detailed messaging. Better that they understand the principles, I would say, through the activities that you're doing and the food that you're serving.
Well, brilliant, Jane. You can have a drink of water now after that. That was obviously a great presentation with practical examples. And obviously, you know, we can relay to where some of that material is for people who want to know more or want to look into that. So I've got a question for Gay now. So Gay, how can we introduce children to you know, the age-old question, to different types of vegetables and fruit, and explore what they like and dislike?
It's a really, really interesting one. Things that children don't like, it's often because they're unfamiliar with them. And a lot of this harks back to what Jane's just been saying about getting children familiar with handling food and talking about them in the context of something else. The pressure for children to try food is one of the main off-putting things that can really deter children from trying food. So in tandem with what Jane's just been saying about using food for creative activities, one of the things that we do in Food for Life, we use the TasteEd resources. I'm just going to share my screen on this one. Hopefully that will come up. There we go. If I can just get that onto full screen. So there we go. So basically TasteEd is the UK wing of Sapera, which is a method used all over Europe. And it helps children to use their senses to explore the taste, the smell, the sight, and all your five senses to bring to all these different vegetables and fruit. Food for Life partner with TasteEd to bring sensory education into the Schools and Early Years Award. And the really great thing is that TasteEd offers their resources free to all UK education settings. And I have spoken to them, and they should be able to share their lesson plans with our HAF settings to enable them to use those lesson plans. But you don't need the lesson plans. I'm going to talk you through a little bit of what we do with a TasteEd session. And the golden rule of this, which is the really great way to make sure that children definitely try something, is that no one has to like it and no one has to try it. So if I can just stop screen sharing now and come back to you. There we go. So hopefully you can all see me again. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to run through what the five senses are. And this is what you do at the start of every TasteEd session. First of all, we wash our hands. The children come to the session with clean hands. They all go to the sink, wash their hands. Then we run through the five senses and we look at our eyes. And what do we do with our eyes? We see. And our nose, what do we do with our nose? We smell. Now, this sounds like really like small children, but actually you can do this with any age group. You can do this with adults. It's just asking you to think about what your sensory organs are and what they do. And so obviously you pitch it to the age of the children that you're looking at. So we're going to start off today with some broccoli. Now I've got a piece of broccoli here. And we think about, what does it look like? What does it look like? So can we describe it? It's like, so we can look at, what colour is it? Is it the same all over now? We can see that some bits are light green and some bits are dark green. What happens if we look into the centre of it and maybe kind of just break off a piece? It's like, is it the same in the middle? It's like, oh, it's got these tendons almost. It's got these chewy bits that you can see that's, and then at one end it's quite stringy, and then at the other end it's really smooth. And we can touch it and we can think, oh, how does it look? So if we focus on one sense at a time and we think about, like, does it remind us of anything? And we can talk about, yeah, it's a little bit like a tree. And we can sort of have a little think about the way that it looks. We can do it with any vegetable. It doesn't have to be broccoli. So we can think about a kiwi fruit. What does a kiwi fruit look like? It's like, when it looks from that side, it looks a bit like a target. And then if you look at it from this side, it's a bit like a rugby ball. So you can go through all of the different, whatever you've got. It doesn't have to be anything special. It can be whatever you've got in your cupboard, talking about the way things look. And then in another session, or you can even do it in the same session, you can talk about the way that food smells. So it's a really interesting one to use, like have some cinnamon in a jar and just give it a sniff and have a sort of talk about, like, what does it remind you of, and does it make you think of anything in particular? Now, I did a session yesterday and I was saying it reminds me of Easter. It reminds me of hot cross buns and Easter biscuits. But it might remind you of Christmas. It's a very sort of spices, remind people of spices are very evocative, and it's something that all children from different cultures will have something that it reminds them of, and it's a really great way of food bringing people together. When you talk about these kinds of things, how food relates to people and how strong these memories are, and you can use things like I mean, you can put something like a lime sliced in half in a jar and just cover it in foil, give it a sniff, and you can start describing the smell of lime. So what does lime smell like? It's fresh, it's zingy, it's bright, it smells like my sweets, it smells like, and you can start talking about these things. That's really great for developing language skills. But it's also really great for helping children to really focus on one sense at a time. Now, obviously, you can sort of imagine how you can go through this. You can talk about how food sounds as well. So, for instance, you can just put a little bit of celery in your mouth, put your hands on your ears, and then chew. And you really notice how incredibly loud celery is when you're when you're chewing it in your mouth. It's all these things are helping children to understand more about the senses that they are using when they're trying something. Now, obviously, it's really great for familiarizing children with different fruits and vegetables, but it's also a really good way of engaging them with these things and helping them to see what it is about things that they like and dislike. Now, you can do these things with cooked vegetables, like cooking things different ways. For instance, if you have a carrot that you roast, a carrot that you grate, and then a carrot that you boil, and ask them to try these 3 different things and describe how these things are different, you can find that children who might not like a boiled carrot really love a raw carrot. And it's because they like crunchy food, but they don't like quiet food. So helping children to have the language to explain what they like and dislike, it also helps them to broaden their range of things they're prepared to try. So the golden rule, as I said, is you do not have to like, you do not have to try. There's ways you can experience all senses without them having to eat it. But the thing is with it is because you've told a child they don't have to eat it, of course they're going to want to eat it. Now, the way that they really focus in these sessions is to really concentrate on the senses. So it's really tempting when you're running a session like this to kind of go off and start thinking about, well, why is it green? What does chlorophyll do? And sort of thinking about the educational things. Now, the really important thing is to keep it about the senses when you're running the session. So think purely about the senses for this session and then use that learning in another session or at the end of the session to go, let's have a think about the thing we've just done. What does it look like? Who wants to draw it? Who wants to use it in a sentence? And actually focus on the senses while you're doing the activity, and then afterwards use the lesson plans that TasteEd provide to do other activities or to talk about what Jane is, what Jane's talking about with kind of thinking about other ways where it grows. Where did you, have you ever seen this before? How have you used it in your cooking? Do you use this in your cooking at home? But yeah, the TasteEd resources are a really fantastic way to introduce children to a range of foods, a range of senses, expand their vocabulary, and use these basic foods to really start to think harder about the way we experience food and to build that food vocabulary, which helps children in all of their literacy, but also to really think about what they like about foods and broaden their horizons and break down that neophobia. And so, yeah, they're really fantastic resources, and you can go onto their website, which I said at the beginning is www.tasteeducation.com, and you can use those as part of your session. So that's it from me. Good luck with it.
Brilliant, Gay. I need you to do a session with my children, my kids. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, that really brings it to life on the back of what Jane was saying as well. That practical bit of, why do I like and dislike? What's my interaction with the food and the kids? Because sometimes just they don't know, that brings their senses to life. The next section. I'm bringing my colleague Karen as who's had 15 years in catering plus with Food for Life, and looks after all the caterers with the Certier scheme. And we know we're very focused in terms of schools and settings, but we're appreciating that, you know, this is new area, new territory, an experience for some of the providers out there, who will be at the local sports team, you know, the local Scout Association, the religious setting, and they're providing HAF, and this is kind of new to them. So we just wanted to talk about some of the practical things to think about, not hold you to account on, but just some of the practical things, you know, in these non-traditional settings, that can help really. So Karen, you know, any thoughts, high-level thoughts or points of wisdom? Much appreciated.
Thanks, Bryn. Yeah, and I just say it was really great to hear Gay and Jane speak about the activities. I think I've learned a lot there as well. It was fantastic. Thanks, guys. Yeah, in terms of food provision, I'm hoping that most of you will have started planning your food now, and it's really difficult. And I think I've got 5 sort of things that I would think about if I was delivering food. And I would start with looking at who's coming, so the age group of the children, the number of children that you've got, and really thinking about collecting information about their dietary needs, so allergens, whether or not they need cultural food. So really doing a survey of the children that you've got coming along to the activities is where I would start planning. And then thinking about where are you going to serve the food? Where are you going to cook the food? Who's going to cook the food? What kind of skills have you got? And equipment. Don't plan, you know, keep it simple. Don't try planning, you know, a sit down hot meal if you haven't got the equipment or the staff skills to actually provide that. So really look at what you've got available. If you're using suppliers, if you're going to be using suppliers to deliver the food, you really do need to be getting in touch with them now. We've had some stories from large caterers and really small sites that supply is really disrupted, especially at this time of year, and especially in the current situation. I'm sure we've all heard about it on the news around deliveries and things like that, and it is causing quite a lot of disruption. So talk to your suppliers about what you think will be available, what they think, what they can advise, and take that into planning your menus and the food that you're going to provide. If you're not using suppliers, if you're using a supermarket or a local shop to buy the food, then really think about how are you going to get that food back and where are you going to store it. Think about the safety, and I know Jane mentioned about the 4 Cs, and I think that they do come into place as well. All too many times I've seen settings go out and buy the food from a supermarket, come back, and then they're left in the bags. So, you know, really think about who's going to get the shopping, who's going to bring it back, who's going to put it away, and have you got space to store it. So really think about the hygiene and safety around that. If you're looking at providing hampers, which many of you might be, to send home, then don't just assume that everybody's got the same level of skills. So if you're putting food into a hamper, it's really great to put some instruction in there with it, or to think about the equipment that families might have. Don't assume that everybody's got you know, a set of pans or the appropriate knives to cut food up. So really consider that as well. Yeah, so those would be the things that I would think about. I would say to keep it simple. Really like some of the ideas that Jane talked about around soups. It's a really good way of getting vegetables into children, and it's quite a simple thing to do. So if you are hosting a group, then soup is a really good simple place to start. And we have done sessions in the past on how to meet the school food standards. They are available in the resources section. It will be very different at Christmas, I think, to the provision that maybe you provided over the summer, and you'll find it hard to meet the school food standards on all of the choices that you make across your provision. But I would really think about some of the key aspects of the school food standards. So really thinking about vegetables. How can you get vegetables? How can you get children to eat vegetables? And thinking about getting vegetables with every meal that you offer. So whether that's cut up, as Jane said, with some kind of dips or hummus, or whether it's in a soup, you know, or the coleslaws, the salads. If you're doing some kind of party day and you're thinking of doing a cold buffet, really think about how you can incorporate vegetables into that. Look at cutting down on the really sugary drinks, having water available throughout the day, and maybe having milk available at the meal service. If you need to provide anything else, it's great to keep children away from the really high sugar juices and drinks. So think about that. And again, you know, oily fish, the only way that my children would eat oily fish was in some kind of pate or something like that. So again, if you're thinking about cold food, think about how you can incorporate sort of just key bits of the school food standards rather than looking at the menu as a whole. So that's what I'd recommend. Yeah, and I think I've mentioned allergens, and we did do something on this in one of the previous sessions. If you're doing food to take away, if you're taking children out, then there is sort of a legal obligation that food is labelled as part of Natasha's law. If you're not comfortable with that, there's lots of information online. There's some providers that do training on that, but there's also the Food Standards Agency where they have training on allergens, Natasha's law, and also hygiene, health and hygiene. So I'd recommend that you have a look at that. But yeah, those are my top tips. I don't know whether you've got anything else, Bryn, that you wanted me to cover.
No, that's brilliant, Karen, and it emphasises and continues on from where Jane and Gay were talking. So that's brilliant. The challenges we may have in the supply chain, you know, your advice is look, speak now.
Absolutely.
And there may be, you know, alternatives that we need to. We're promised that turkey won't be an issue, but you know, who knows? But there's always ways and means, isn't there? There's always things that can be swapped out practically for other. That's kind of what we found in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd just say if you are using suppliers, then I would speak to them, and they're the best people to give you advice. Go to them, ask them, you know, tell them what you're planning on doing, and just do that planning beforehand so that you know. And I would have a backup plan as well, just to really think about, well, you know, if our main bit of the food doesn't come, what are we going to do about it? Even if that's having somebody available that can go down and get it. And then I think one thing that I probably didn't mention that has been brought up before is really think about transport as well. I think some providers over the summer hadn't really thought about the transport, and especially when you're transporting hot food, make sure you can get the boxes that keep food hot. You know, if you're transporting soup, make sure you've got it in a proper transportable flask. We heard some stories over the summer whereby they were just transporting hot food in the back of a van. It was cold when it got there. Soup had spilled. If you're transporting cold food, then really think about the sort of safety of that and whether it needs to be kept chilled. And again, you can get the polystyrene boxes and things like that. So and it goes, as I've said, with the supermarkets as well. Yeah, definitely something to think about.
That's brilliant, Karen, and thank you so much for that. And those kind of references we've made, and you know, there will be areas we can link you into, you know, a guide to follow on questions, because obviously we'll be helping you know, the consortium look after your interests, and those are local authorities as well. So yeah, no, thank you again, everyone on the panel. I think safe to say that I've learned a lot. We hope it's been practical. We've made it purposely high level as well, but we can go into more details, as we've said. Yes, thank you very much from Food for Life. Thank you for listening. And if I could pass back to Denise, who will finish up.
Yeah, I've actually got some questions and comments, if I could, to the panel, please. That was great, really interesting, and I think this will probably be one of our sessions that we probably have to put out for a warning, which is this session should not be viewed on an empty tummy. I think just going back to some of the comments that Jane made about activities with food and even prepping food, Jane, I'm conscious that some of our providers of HAF, especially those ones where, if you like, let's just say their normal activity would be as a rugby coach. And if you like, they've had to bring other ideas in to meet the HAF criteria. But some of this working with food, which I think is wonderful, and I was certainly the popcorn idea, I can imagine an activity outside with a fire pit and doing the popcorn. Some of our providers who are watching this may be thinking, are they going to need food hygiene certificates for be doing some of that basic stuff?
I mean, it's advisable that you have a level 2, that somebody within the setting would have a level 2 food safety qualification. I mean, you can do them very easily online. To be honest, you know, some of my team renew theirs online, and I would normally advise teachers. It wouldn't be a legal requirement. We know that in schools that it's best practice, it's due diligence, but it isn't a legal requirement in school, in primary school, to teach, you know, for a teacher to do a cooking activity. So yeah, I would familiarise yourself with it if you can do an online course, or find somebody in your setting who has got it and refer to them and just check things with them.
Okay, thank you for that. And some of the stuff Gabe was talking about the senses, I mean, it just reminds me of actually what we've been, what a lot of us are suffering through now post COVID, is some of these sort of losing your senses. And I loved your comment about by telling a child they don't need to eat it, which is the real incentive to try it. And I think one of the other things I think is worth some of our local authorities investing in is those Eat Well guides, which perhaps providers could have in their setting or whatever. And this really is to the whole panel. We have heard that whilst we know HAF is to deliver this one main meal, we are finding children, as they go into school, they are coming to the HAF activities, whether that's 8:30, 9, 10 in the morning, having not had breakfast, and are hungry. And actually then to sustain them through any activity until we get to, let's say, lunch. Some simple ideas, guys, please, on what could be a cheap but healthy option for some of these providers that may not need, you know, catering is probably going to be out of the question, but simple ideas for breakfast I think would be great.
If I can just link back to the slides I showed, I guess the bagel idea is really good, because you can be depends how much money you've got and you know what's available to you, but you could be really creative with that and allow people to, you know, to go with their likes and dislikes, or like the overnight oats type recipe, and then adding fruit to it. So those are really easy and accessible recipes, and we've got recipes for those, so I'll pass those on, and then you can post those up.
Thank you. I don't know if anybody else wanted to pitch in there, but I'd also, can somebody just probably, I mentioned right at the beginning, sort of street food. Now, we know what has also been a challenge for HAF providers and local authorities in general is engaging with those older age range children, those eligible free school meal children, so your teens. And food has been an issue, and some of the ideas that have sort of come around are sort of late afternoon, early evening sessions to engage with this age range, and then put in some sort of innovative sort of street food, whatever. What's your feeling or what are your views of that kind of food, and what sort of limitations would you put on that food?
Yeah, so do you want me to come into that?
Karen, yeah.
Great stuff. So we do have this a lot with secondary schools and the food offer that they provide, and I think it's sort of taken for granted that children of that age really like to have something that they can pick up or take away, and I don't think that's necessarily an issue. What you want to do is get the food into the kids, and just because it's street food or seen as street food, it's more about the branding or the way that it's presented as opposed to what's actually in it. So even I know there's some really great recipes out there for things like tacos, or looking at pizza slices and things like that. Just because it's a pizza doesn't mean that it has to be really unhealthy. You can load it with healthy, use stronger cheese, but cut down on the amount of cheese that goes on it. So that's one tip that we talk about, is using if you're going to put cheese on it, use a good quality cheese that tastes, but you can actually lower the amount of fat that's on there. Look at don't be buying the pizza toppings that are in tins. They're just loaded with sugar. All you need is some tomato paste, and some you don't even really need to chop onions or anything into it. Use something like that and really think about what's going into that food. If you're looking at doing burgers, there's some really good work with your suppliers, or look at the supermarket, some really good high quality meat burgers, or now this sort of 50-50 veg and meat, or even veggie burgers, things like that. So it's not about not serving that sort of food, because that's the sort of food that teenagers like. And if they're coming to a holiday club, you want to make it a little bit, you want them to eat, you want them to have that experience, and anything that you can do to encourage them to eat something that they might not have eaten before, and present that in a way that is really, what they'd see on the high street is brilliant. But you don't have to serve the type of food that they serve on the high street. It's just the way that it's presented. So really think about what you can do to make that food healthier, but still that offer that they like.
Yeah, if I can just come in there just briefly, one of the things that I think is really important is that teenagers are really interested in their health and the planet, and especially mental health. And when you're doing these creative fast food ideas like pizza and tacos and spring rolls and stuff, that's perfectly possible to make it look like fast food and feel like fast food, but really healthy, and actually not be preachy, but to talk about the benefits of these foods and how they're really supportive to mental health, how they're really good for your skin. And for me, with a teenage daughter, all I have to do is go, this is really good for your skin, and she's all over it. So just selling the benefits of the healthy food, not talking about what's bad about these other things, but talking about how you're helping, this is really good for the planet, we're eating food that's really healthy for you, and all these things, and actually kind of talking about why they're good while you're doing it, not being preachy, but just emphasizing why they're good. is a really great way of helping children kind of feel invested in these foods as well.
Thank you. That's really, really useful. Okay, well, I think we're more or less coming to the end of the session now. So I want to give a really big thank you to Bryn, Jane, Karen and Gay. It's been incredibly useful. I'm sure our providers will also think that. Finally, as I mentioned at the beginning, this is just one in a series of provider bite size that we have been running and will continue to run on various subjects. To find out more or to look at some of the past bite sizes we've done and to know about future ones, do contact your local authority HAF lead coordinator who will show you the links to all of these sessions. So again, a very big thank you to all of you. It's been great. I am now incredibly hungry, but I am going to eat healthily. I will leave the chocolate in the fridge. So thank you all very much indeed, and goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thanks.